When my adopted daughter reconnected with her biological family, she erased me from her graduation celebration like I had never existed. But when her birth father expected her to contribute to the expensive celebration dinner, she tried using my credit card and discovered I had already made my decision. What happened next changed everything between us forever. Thank you for watching Grandma's Stories. Your support keeps me going every single day. If these stories touch your heart, please subscribe to our channel. I would love to know which city you are watching from in the comments below. We might give you a special shout out in our next video. Today's warm hello goes to Maria from Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you for being part of our story family. Now let me tell you what really happened to me. I never imagined that 22 years of motherhood could be erased so easily. That realization kept me awake for weeks, staring at the ceiling and wondering how someone you raised from infancy could suddenly act like you were nothing more than a temporary caretaker. My name is Catherine and I am 71 years old. For over 2 decades, I was not just her guardian or her helper. I was her mother in every sense that mattered. I was the one who rocked her to sleep during those endless colicky nights when she was a baby. I was there for every scraped knee, every bad dream, every time she needed comfort when the world felt too big and scary. I made her lunch every school day for 12 years, always including little drawings and encouraging notes because I wanted her to know she was loved even when we were apart. I taught her to drive even though it terrified me to sit in that passenger seat while she learned to navigate busy streets. I was there when mean girls at school made her cry, when her first boyfriend broke her heart, and for every birthday party where sometimes I was the only adult who showed up with a homemade cake and genuine excitement for her special day. But in just a few months after she found her biological family, everything I thought we had built together crumbled. All those years of love, sacrifice, and dedication suddenly seemed worthless to her. Like she was embarrassed by our history together and eager to replace it with something that felt more authentic to her. It started with subtle changes that I tried to convince myself were normal growing pains. She stopped calling me mom and started using my first name like we were casual acquaintances instead of family. I tried to be understanding the first few times it happened, thinking maybe she just needed space to figure out her identity. I did not want to be the kind of mother who clung too tightly. I knew young adults needed room to discover who they were becoming. But I never expected her journey of self-discovery would require her to completely reject me. She began staying out later and later, coming home smelling of unfamiliar perfume and talking about them like they were perfect. My real father thinks I should major in psychology, she would say at dinner, not even noticing how the word real cut through me like a knife. Or my birth mother says I have her artistic eye, completely forgetting that I was the one who spent countless weekends taking her to art classes and encouraging her creativity. Every conversation became a reminder that I was being replaced by people who shared her DNA but had missed every important moment of her actual childhood. My heart would ache every time she spoke about them, but I forced myself to smile and act supportive because I was terrified that showing any jealousy would push her even further away from me. So I stayed quiet and watched her systematically remove me from her life like I was an outdated piece of furniture she had outgrown. I tried to convince myself this was temporary, that she would eventually realize that love is not determined by genetics but by consistency and sacrifice. I was wrong. The graduation celebration announcement came during breakfast on a Tuesday morning. She mentioned it casually while scrolling through her phone, not bothering to make eye contact with me. "We are having a big dinner to celebrate my graduation," she mumbled between bites of the cereal I had bought for her. "Just a family thing to mark the milestone." I felt my heart lift with excitement. "I would love to help plan everything," I said eagerly. "We could have it here in the dining room, or if you want something fancier, we could book that Italian restaurant you love downtown. I can make all your favorite dishes if you prefer a home celebration." She finally looked up from her phone, and the expression on her face made my stomach drop. "Oh no," she said quickly, like she was correcting a misunderstanding. "This is only for my actual family. You know, blood relatives. You would not really fit in with everyone else there anyway." I remember standing there by the kitchen sink, my hands frozen around the coffee mug I was holding. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean I would not fit in?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shrugged like it was obvious. It is just for biological family members. You understand, right? It is nothing personal against you. Nothing personal. 22 years of motherhood dismissed as nothing personal. I felt something break inside my chest, not dramatically, but quietly, like a branch snapping under too much weight. That night I could not sleep at all. I lay in bed until almost dawn, scrolling through photos on my phone, looking at pictures that told the story of her entire life. Her first day of kindergarten in that yellow dress I had picked out specially. The Halloween costumes I made by hand because store-bought ones never seemed quite right. Christmas mornings where her face lit up with joy at presents I had saved for months to afford. I remembered the night she had pneumonia when she was 7 and I sat beside her bed for 3 days straight, taking her temperature every hour and barely eating because I was so worried about her fever. I remembered teaching her to ride a two-wheeler in our driveway, running alongside her with my hand on the back of the seat until she was steady enough to go on her own. I remembered the mother-daughter camping trip we took when she was 12, just the two of us sleeping in a tiny tent and roasting marshmallows over a campfire while she told me about her dreams for the future. I remembered every parent-teacher conference, every school play where I sat in the front row cheering, every time she called me from college just to hear my voice when she was homesick. Was none of that real to her anymore? Did none of those moments matter now that she had found people who looked like her? I had raised her with my whole heart, giving her everything I had to give, and the moment someone who shared her genetics appeared, I was suddenly disposable. I did not go to the graduation dinner. I was not invited, and I was not about to show up uninvited to witness her celebrating with the people she considered her real family. I did not call her that day or send a congratulatory text. I just let the evening pass in silence while I imagined her sitting at some expensive restaurant, surrounded by strangers who happened to share her eye color and laugh, accepting their praise for accomplishments they had nothing to do with achieving. I wondered if anyone at that table knew who had helped her with homework every night for years. I wondered if they knew who had driven her to job interviews and college visits, who had listened to her practice speeches in our living room until she felt confident enough to deliver them in public. Probably not, because none of that fit the narrative she wanted to tell about finding her real family. I spent that evening alone in our house, walking through rooms filled with memories of raising her, and I felt like someone close to me had died even though she was very much alive. She was just dead to me in the way that mattered most. The version of her who used to hug me tight and tell me I was the best mom in the world was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as an obstacle to her authentic family story. When morning came, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair where she used to eat breakfast before school. She had not eaten a meal with me in months, but I still set out a plate for her every morning out of habit, like some sad ritual I could not bring myself to stop. That morning was different though. That morning I finally stopped setting the extra place. I also went online to our shared bank account and quietly removed her access to my credit card. Not because I wanted to hurt her but because I needed to respect myself. If I was not important enough to be included in her life, then my money should not be either. She had made her choice about who mattered to her. Now I was making mine about what I was willing to tolerate. The first notification came to my phone at 8:47 that evening. It was an alert from my bank asking if I had authorized a charge of $324 at Bellamore restaurant. At first I thought it might be a scam, but something about the restaurant name seemed familiar. I checked the details and saw the transaction attempt had happened at 8:43 p.m., right around the time her graduation dinner would have been ending. I knew Bellamore because I had looked at their menu online for her 21st birthday last year. When I saw how expensive everything was, I decided to cook her favorite meal at home instead and use the money I saved to buy her a nice piece of jewelry she had been wanting. Apparently she had no problem with those high prices when she expected me to pay for them. I called the bank and spoke to a representative who confirmed that the charge had been declined. She told me it was attempted using my authorized user card ending in 7823. That was her card, the one I had given her for school expenses, gas, and genuine emergencies. Not for fancy graduation dinners I was not invited to attend. The representative also mentioned there had been 4 other declined attempts in rapid succession, all within a 5-minute window. I could picture exactly what had happened. She had confidently offered to pay for her portion of the expensive meal, maybe even volunteering to cover more to impress her new family, only to watch her plan fall apart in front of everyone when the card kept getting rejected. There was a part of me that felt satisfied by this turn of events, and I am not proud of that feeling, but I cannot deny it existed. For months I had been made to feel like I did not matter, like I was easily replaceable, like 22 years meant nothing. Now she was experiencing what it felt like to have your safety net disappear when you least expected it. I did not hear from her that night. No frantic phone calls, no angry text messages, no desperate knocking at my door. Just silence. I imagined her birth family having to cover her portion of the bill, their faces showing annoyance and embarrassment as they realized their newly found daughter was not as independent as she had pretended to be. Maybe for the first time they saw her not as the successful college graduate she appeared to be, but as someone who still depended on the woman she was trying so hard to distance herself from. Maybe they finally understood that erasing me from her story did not erase the reality of who had actually supported her all these years. The next morning she showed up at my door looking like she had not slept at all. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes were red with exhaustion and tears. She did not knock gently like she used to when she lived here. She pounded on the door with urgency and anger, the sound echoing through the house like an accusation. When I opened the door, she pushed past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. For the first time in months, she called me Mom, but the way she said it sounded more like an accusation than an endearment. "What the hell, Mom?" she demanded, crossing her arms and glaring at me like I had committed some terrible crime. "Why did you cancel my credit card access? You embarrassed me in front of everyone last night. My birth father had to pay for my entire meal. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I closed the door slowly and followed her into the living room, my heart already pounding because I knew this conversation was going to hurt both of us. I sat down calmly and looked directly at her before responding. "You cut me out of your life," I said quietly. "I thought it was only fair to cut you out of my bank account." Her mouth opened but no words came out at first. She looked genuinely shocked, like it had never occurred to her that her actions might have consequences, that treating me like I was disposable might actually result in me stepping back. "You humiliated me," she said again, her voice shaking with emotion. "Everyone was watching when my card got declined over and over. My birth mother had to pay for everything and she was not happy about it. They all think you are petty and vindictive now." "Good," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Let them think whatever they want. They do not know me and clearly neither do you anymore." She took a step back like I had slapped her. "That is not fair," she whispered. "I never said I did not love you." I made a sound that was supposed to be a laugh but came out bitter and hollow. "You did not need to say it with words. You showed me exactly how much I matter to you when you excluded me from your graduation celebration. When you started calling strangers your real parents in front of our neighbors. When you erased me from your life so easily the moment you found people who shared your DNA. I could feel my hands trembling but I kept talking. You want me to be invisible when it suits you but available when you need something. You want to treat me like hired help who raised you temporarily while you waited for your real family to show up. But you still expect me to pay your bills and clean up your messes. That is not how any of this works." She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, her defiant anger crumbling into something that looked like genuine confusion and hurt. "I did not think you would actually cut me off," she admitted quietly. "I thought you would always be there no matter what." That word always hit me like a punch to the chest. "So you knew you were treating me badly," I said, the hurt climbing up my throat and making it hard to speak clearly. "You just assumed I would take it forever because I always had before." She did not deny it, which told me everything I needed to know about how she really saw our relationship. I was not her mother in her mind. I was her safety net, always there to catch her when she fell but never deserving of the same consideration she gave to people who mattered to her. "You want independence," I said, standing up and looking down at her. "Then be independent. That includes paying for your own fancy dinners with your real family. You cannot push me out of the mother role but expect me to keep playing the role of your personal bank account. Pick one." She started crying then, The kind of deep, heartbroken sobs that used to make me drop everything and rush to comfort her. But I did not move from where I was standing. I watched her cry and felt my heart breaking too, but I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that I had finally said what needed to be said, that I had finally stood up for myself after months of being treated like I did not matter. Sometimes loving someone means letting them experience the full consequences of their choices, even when it hurts to watch. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone to treat you badly, even if they are crying about it. She wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at me with a kind of desperation I had never seen before. "What do I have to do?" she asked. "How can I prove to you that I mean it this time?" "I wish it were that simple," I replied. "But trust is not something you can rebuild overnight. Takes time, consistency, and a lot of work. And right now, I am not sure I have the energy to go through this process with you." She nodded like she understood, but I could see in her eyes that she was still hoping for a quick fix, some magic words that would make everything go back to the way it used to be. "I think you should go," I said, not unkindly but with finality. "I think you should figure out how to build a life that does not depend on me being your safety net. Maybe someday we can find our way back to each other, but not today." She stood there for another moment, looking like she wanted to argue or plead or make one more attempt to change my mind. But finally she just nodded and turned to walk away. I watched her get in her car and drive off, and for the first time in months, I felt something like peace settle over me. Not happiness exactly, but a kind of calm that comes from finally stopping a fight you never should have had to have in the first place. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt different from before. It was not the anxious silence of waiting for her to come back or call. It was the peaceful silence of a house that belonged to me again, of a life that I was living for myself instead of for someone who did not appreciate what I was giving them. I started doing things I had not done in years. I took a pottery class at the community center. I joined a book club. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, working with dogs who had been abandoned by people who were supposed to love them. There was something healing about caring for creatures who were grateful for basic kindness instead of taking it for granted. I also started going to therapy, something I had always thought was for other people with bigger problems than mine. But my therapist helped me understand that what had happened to me was a form of emotional abuse, that being discarded and devalued by someone you had loved unconditionally was a real trauma that deserved to be acknowledged and processed. She helped me see that my daughter's behavior was not just typical young adult rebellion or confusion about her identity. It was a deliberate choice to treat me as disposable while maintaining access to my resources and support. She helped me understand that setting boundaries was not cruel or selfish, but necessary for my own well-being. 3 months passed before I heard from her again. This time it was not a phone call or a visit. It was a letter, handwritten on simple notebook paper and delivered through the mail like something from an earlier time when people put more thought into their communications. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it, not sure I was ready to have my peace disturbed by whatever was inside. But curiosity finally won, and I carefully tore open the seal. The letter was longer than I expected, several pages of her careful handwriting covering both sides of each sheet. She started by acknowledging everything she had done wrong, not in vague terms but with specific examples that showed she had really thought about the impact of her actions. She wrote about the graduation dinner and how wrong it had been to exclude me. She wrote about calling me by my first name and how dismissive that must have felt after all the years I had been her mother. She wrote about the things she had said about me to her birth family, and how hurtful and inaccurate those characterizations had been. But the part that affected me most was near the end, where she wrote about what she had learned during our time apart. "I thought finding my birth family would make me feel complete," she wrote. "I thought it would answer all the questions I had about myself and fill some hole I did not even know existed. But what I discovered is that the hole was not about biology or genetics. It was about not appreciating what I already had. You were not just the woman who raised me. You were my mother in every way that mattered. You were the one who chose me, who fought for me, who never gave up on me even when I was difficult or ungrateful. My birth parents gave me DNA, but you gave me everything else. You gave me love, security, values, opportunities, and a foundation that I am only now starting to understand the value of. I have been living on my own for 3 months now, working 2 jobs to pay rent and buy groceries and cover all the expenses I never thought about when you were taking care of them. I have been to the emergency room twice and had to handle the insurance paperwork myself. I have been lonely and scared and overwhelmed, and every time something goes wrong, my first instinct is still to call you. But I do not call because I know I do not deserve that comfort anymore. I know I threw away the right to your support when I treated you like you were replaceable. I know that love is not just about what someone can do for you, but about how you treat them when you do not think you need them anymore. I am not writing this letter to ask you to take me back or to forgive me or to fix the mess I made of my life. I am writing it to tell you that I finally understand what I lost, and to say thank you for all the years when I was too young and stupid to appreciate what I had. You deserved better than the daughter I turned out to be. You deserved gratitude and respect and acknowledgement for everything you sacrificed to give me the best life possible. You deserved to be included in my milestones and celebrated for your role in my achievements. Instead, I gave you heartbreak and rejection and the kind of pain that no parent should have to endure. I hope someday you can remember me as the little girl who used to climb into your bed during thunderstorms, who thought you were the smartest and strongest person in the world, who felt safe and loved because of everything you did for me every single day. I hope you can forget the selfish young woman who temporarily lost her way and hurt the person who mattered most. I love you, Mom. I always have, even when I was too confused and foolish to show it properly. Thank you for 22 years of unconditional love. Thank you for being the kind of mother who put my needs before your own happiness. Thank you for being strong enough to let me go when I needed to learn these lessons the hard way. I set the letter down and realized I was crying, not the angry tears I had shed so many times over the past months, but something deeper and more complicated. Relief, sadness, love, and loss all mixed together in a way that made my chest feel tight and hollow at the same time. I read the letter 3 more times, looking for manipulation or hidden requests for money or help, but I could not find any. It seemed genuine in a way her previous apologies had not been. It seemed like the words of someone who had actually learned something difficult about themselves and was not asking for anything in return for acknowledging it. But I also knew that recognizing growth and being ready to trust again were 2 different things. She had said beautiful words before, when she was desperate or scared or needed something from me. The real test would be whether she could maintain this level of self-awareness and consideration when things were going well for her, when she did not need me to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. I put the letter in my desk drawer, not to forget about it, but to let it settle in my mind before deciding what, if anything, I wanted to do about it. I had learned to be cautious about hope. It was a luxury I could not afford until I was sure it would not be used against me again. 2 more months passed quietly. I continued with my pottery classes and my book club and my volunteer work at the animal shelter. I continued with therapy, working through the complicated feelings that come with loving someone who has hurt you deeply. I learned to sit with ambiguity, to accept that some relationships exist in gray areas that cannot be easily resolved. And then, one Saturday morning in early fall, I was working in my garden when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked up to see her getting out of an old Honda that I did not recognize, wearing jeans and a simple sweater that looked like something she had bought at a thrift store rather than the expensive clothes she used to favor. She walked toward me slowly, not with the confident stride of someone who expected to be welcomed, but with the careful steps of someone who was not sure of their reception. She stopped a few feet away from where I was kneeling among my tomato plants and waited for me to acknowledge her. "Hi," she said quietly when I finally looked up at her. "I was hoping we could talk." I sat back on my heels and studied her face. She looked different than she had the last time I saw her. Older, more serious, like someone who had been carrying heavy responsibilities for a while. There were circles under her eyes that spoke of long work shifts and restless nights. "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "About everything," she replied. "About the letter I wrote and whether there is any chance you might be willing to start over with me. Not go back to how things were, but maybe find a new way to be family together." I stood up and brushed the dirt off my gardening gloves, buying myself time to think. The cautious part of me wanted to say no, wanted to protect myself from the possibility of being hurt again. But there was another part, a quieter part, that had been waiting for this moment without realizing it. "You can sit on the porch if you want," I said finally. I need to finish weeding this row, but we can talk while I work. She nodded gratefully and settled onto the top step of my front porch, close enough that we could have a conversation but far enough away that I did not feel crowded or pressured. I meant everything I said in that letter, she began. These past 5 months have been the hardest of my life, not because of the practical challenges, though those have been difficult, but because of understanding what I threw away. I kept weeding, using the repetitive motion to keep my hands busy while my mind processed her words. My birth parents are not bad people, she continued. But they are not my parents either, not in any way that matters. They are interested in me as an idea, as proof that they made good genetic choices, but they do not know me as a person. They do not know that I hate the sound of alarm clocks, or that I cannot sleep without a nightlight, or that I sing off-key when I am nervous. She paused, and I could hear the emotion creeping into her voice. You know all of those things because you lived through them with me. You were there for all the small moments that add up to a lifetime. You were there when I was boring and cranky and difficult, not just for the highlights that look good in photos. I pulled a particularly stubborn weed and tossed it into my bucket before responding. Why now? Asked. Why are you telling me this now instead of 6 months ago when it might have made a difference? Because 6 months ago I thought I knew what I wanted, she replied honestly. I thought finding my biological roots would give me some kind of identity that I was missing. I thought having parents who looked like me would make me feel more authentic somehow. And what do you think now? Now I think authenticity comes from the relationships you build and maintain, not from the circumstances of your birth. I think family is about showing up consistently, not about sharing DNA. I think I confused fantasy with reality and lost the most important person in my life because of it. I moved to the next row of plants, still listening but not ready to stop working and face this conversation directly. I also think, she continued, that I needed to lose you to understand what I had. I needed to experience what it was like to navigate the world without your support to realize how much I had been taking for granted. I needed to be completely on my own to understand that independence is not the same thing as abandonment. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. I know I do not deserve another chance. I know I hurt you in ways that cannot be easily forgiven. But I hope that maybe we could find a way to build something new together. Not the relationship we had before, because I understand that is gone, but something honest and equal where I give back as much as I take. I finished the row I was working on and finally turned to look at her directly. She was sitting with her hands clasped in her lap, looking at me with an expression of hope mixed with resignation, like someone who was asking for something they knew they might not receive. What would that look like? Yes. This new relationship you are imagining. She took a deep breath before answering. It would look like me calling you mom again because that is who you are to me. Not because of biology but because of choice and love and 22 years of showing up. It would look like me including you in important events in my life, not as an afterthought but as an honored guest. It would look like me contributing to our relationship instead of just taking from it. It would look like me remembering your birthday and asking about your pottery classes and caring about your life, not just expecting you to care about mine. She paused and seemed to gather her courage before continuing. It would also look like me understanding that trust has to be rebuilt slowly, that words are not enough to fix what I broke. It would look like me being patient while you decide whether you want to take this risk with me again. I sat down on my porch steps, not next to her but close enough that we were sharing the same space for the first time in months. I looked out at my garden, at the plants I had nurtured from seeds into something beautiful and productive, and thought about growth and second chances and the complicated nature of love. I do not know if I can do this again, I said honestly. I do not know if I have it in me to open my heart to someone who might decide I am dispensable the next time something more appealing comes along. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. Understand. I know I broke something that might not be fixable. But, I continued, I also know that you are the child I raised and loved for more than 2 decades. I know that people can change and grow, especially when they have been forced to face real consequences for their actions. I know that love is not always easy or safe, but it is still worth fighting for when it is real. I turned to look at her directly. If we are going to try this, there have to be rules. Boundaries that protect both of us. She nodded eagerly. Whatever you need. I will agree to anything. First, I said this is not about going back to the way things were. That version of our relationship is over. We are starting from scratch as two adults who choose to be family to each other. Second, I continued, trust has to be earned back gradually. That means consistent behavior over time, not just good intentions or nice words. Third, we both have to be honest about our needs and limitations. I will not pretend to be okay with things that hurt me just to keep the peace. And you cannot expect me to be available whenever you need something without regard for my own life and priorities. She was nodding along with everything I said, her face serious and attentive. And finally I said, you have to understand that this is your only chance. I am too old and too tired to go through this kind of heartbreak again. If you decide in 6 months or 2 years that you have found something better than what we can build together, I will not be here waiting when you change your mind. I understand, she said quietly. I know I used up all my chances already. I know this is a gift I do not deserve. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing the weight of what we had just discussed. The air between us felt different somehow, not comfortable exactly, but hopeful in a cautious way. Can I help you finish your garden? She asked finally. I do not have anywhere else I need to be today. I looked at her for a long moment, this young woman who had been my whole world for so long, who had broken my heart and was now asking for the chance to help put it back together. She looked sincere, humble in a way she had never been before, like someone who had learned the difference between asking for something and deserving it. You can help, I said finally. But if you get bored or decide you have something better to do, just say so. Do not pretend to be interested in something you are not. She smiled, the first real smile I had seen from her in almost a year. I promise I will be honest with you about everything from now on. No more pretending, no more saying what I think you want to hear. We worked in the garden together for the rest of the morning, not talking much but existing in the same space peacefully for the first time since she had found her birth family. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, like putting on a piece of clothing you used to love but had not worn in a long time. When we were finished, I invited her to stay for lunch, the first meal we had shared in my house since everything fell apart. We made sandwiches and ate them on the back deck, talking about small things like her job and my book club and the weather. It was not magical or dramatically healing, but it was a beginning. It was two people who loved each other choosing to try again despite all the reasons they had to walk away. It was the first tentative step toward building something new from the ruins of what had been broken. That evening, after she had gone home to her small apartment across town, I called my therapist and told her about the conversation we had had. How do you feel about it? She asked. Scared, I replied honestly, but also hopeful. Like maybe this is what forgiveness actually looks like. Not pretending that nothing happened, but choosing to believe that people can change when they have real motivation to do so. And what will you do if she disappoints you again? I thought about that for a moment. I guess I will survive it just like I survived it the first time. But I will not regret taking this chance because the alternative is giving up on love entirely, and I am not ready to do that yet. 6 months later, we celebrated my 72nd birthday together. Not with a big party or an elaborate celebration, but with a quiet dinner at my favorite restaurant where she insisted on paying the bill as a small way of showing appreciation for everything I had done for her over the years. She gave me a photo album she had made by hand, filled with pictures from throughout her childhood along with new photos from the past few months. On the first page, she had written an inscription that made me cry happy tears for the first time in over a year. To my real mother, it said. The woman who chose me, raised me, and loved me even when I forgot how to love her back. Thank you for giving me a second chance to be your daughter. Our relationship is different now than it was before. More careful in some ways, more honest in others. We both work harder at it, both of us aware of how precious and fragile this second chance really is. She calls me every Sunday, not because I expect it but because she wants to. She includes me in her life naturally now. Not as an obligation but as someone whose opinion and presence she genuinely values. Is it perfect? Well, do we still have moments of awkwardness or uncertainty? Course. But it is real in a way that our previous relationship sometimes was not. It is built on mutual respect and choice rather than obligation and assumption. Most importantly, I know now that I can survive losing her if I have to, which paradoxically makes it easier to love her fully without fear. I know my worth is not dependent on being needed by someone else. I know I can choose myself if I have to, which means I can also choose to trust again when someone proves they deserve it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from someone who is treating you badly. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show someone that your love has boundaries, that you will not accept being treated as disposable or replaceable. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that person will use the space you give them to grow into someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved. Someone who understands that family is not about biology or obligation, but about showing up consistently with respect, gratitude, and genuine care. Our story does not have the neat fairy tale ending that people like to see. It has something better. It has the messy, complicated, hard-won reality of two people who chose to fight for each other even when it would have been easier to walk away. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love because they were treating you as disposable? Have you ever had to choose your own peace over someone else's comfort? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and there are others who need to hear that they are not alone in these difficult choices. If this story touched something deep in your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Grandma's Stories. There are more real-life experiences like this one, stories about love and loss and the courage it takes to choose yourself when no one else will. I will see you in the next video. Her sleeve and looked at me with eyes that seemed different somehow, less sure of herself than before. I did not think it would end up like this, she whispered. Neither did I replied just as quietly. But here we are. She came back the next day, but this time she did not bang on the door. I found her sitting on my front steps like a lost child, her backpack beside her and tears streaming down her cheeks. For a moment she looked exactly like the little girl I had comforted through so many disappointments and hurts over the years. But this little girl had grown up to be someone who called me by my first name and excluded me from important moments in her life. This little girl had chosen to replace me with strangers, and was only here now because her replacement family was not turning out to be the perfect fairy tale she had imagined. I opened the door and stood in the doorway, not inviting her in but not closing the door either. You are early, I said with no emotion in my voice. She looked up at me with swollen eyes. I did not know where else to go, she said, her voice cracking with the kind of desperation I used to drop everything to fix. Why did you not go to your real mother's house? I asked, and I know it sounded cruel, but she needed to understand what it felt like to be told you were not someone's first choice, to be treated like a backup plan. Her face crumpled like I had hit her, and maybe I had, emotionally speaking. She needed to know what those words really meant, how it felt to be dismissed as not real enough, not important enough, not family enough. She stood up shakily, brushing dirt off her jeans. I messed up, she said quietly. I know I did, but you do not have to be mean to me about it. That word mean made me pause. I had spent months swallowing my hurt in silence, pretending to be fine every time she mentioned her birth family like they were the answer to all her problems. I had tiptoed around her new loyalties like they were precious things I might accidentally break if I spoke too honestly about my feelings. And now she thought I was being mean because I was finally telling her the truth about how her actions had affected me. I am not being mean, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am being honest. There is a difference. I pointed at her backpack. If you are here looking for money or a place to stay, you will need to ask the people you chose over me. The people you said were your real family. Her jaw trembled like she wanted to argue but could not find the words. They are not what I thought they would be, she admitted in a whisper. It is not like I imagined. Her voice got smaller and more uncertain. My birth father insisted I pay for my own meal at graduation dinner. He said it was important for me to learn responsibility, but he did not tell me that beforehand. When the check came, he just looked at me expectantly and said I was an adult now and needed to start acting like one. I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air between us. It sounded like tough love, but tough love hits differently when it comes from someone who was never there for the easy parts of raising you. For a moment I felt the familiar urge to comfort her, to bring her inside and make her favorite breakfast and fix everything the way I always had before. But then I remembered how she had looked when she told me I would not fit in at her graduation dinner. I remembered overhearing her on the phone telling someone that I was just the woman who raised her, but her birth parents were her actual family. That conversation had played in my head for weeks. Just the woman who raised her. Like 22 years of motherhood could be summarized as temporary childcare until someone better came along. You made your choice, I said, stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind me. And I accepted it. But choices have consequences. You do not get to make me disappear when it is convenient for you and then expect me to reappear when things get difficult with your real family. She looked away, tears streaming down her cheeks. I did not think you would actually let me go, she whispered like she hated admitting it. That got to me because of course she did not think I would let her go. I had always been the one who held our family together, the one who made sure nothing ever fell apart completely. I was the safety net, the constant, the person in the background making sure she never had to face the real world alone. But I was not that person anymore. Could not be. I would not be. I love you, I said, my voice catching despite my efforts to stay strong. But love is not permission to use people. You have treated me like a backup plan for months, and I cannot keep being the person you only remember exists when your other options disappoint you. She looked shocked, like she had never considered that my love might have limits, that even the most patient person could reach a breaking point. So that is it? She asked, her voice hollow with disbelief. You are just giving up on me. I nodded slowly. For now, yes. Until you figure out what family really means. Until you learn that love is not just about biology and that the people who show up every day deserve the same respect as the people who show up once. I turned around and went back inside, closing the door quietly but firmly behind me. I did not slam it, I did not lock it dramatically, but I did not open it again either, even when I heard her quiet crying resume outside. I sat on my couch afterward and stared at the spot on the porch where she had been sitting, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. It was not happiness or relief exactly, but something like determination. I had not closed the door because I was angry. I had closed it because I needed to survive with my dignity intact. I had given her everything I had to give for over 2 decades. Now I was giving her the space to figure out whether any of that had ever meant anything to her at all. 5 days passed in complete silence. The kind of quiet that does not just fill your house but gets into your bones and makes everything feel hollow. I did not hear from her at all. No phone calls, no text messages, not even an email. Just emptiness where our relationship used to be. And I will be honest, part of me kept waiting. Every morning I found myself glancing out the window a little longer than necessary, looking for her car in the driveway. Every evening I left the porch light on later than I should have, some stubborn part of my heart still hoping she would come back with a real apology instead of more excuses. Hope is a cruel thing sometimes. It does not give up easily, even when logic tells you to move on. It keeps whispering what if and maybe and just give her one more chance until you want to scream at it to be quiet and let you heal in peace. But when my phone finally rang that Friday morning, I knew before I even looked at the caller ID that it was about her. I did not recognize the number, but something in my stomach twisted with the familiar anxiety that always came when she was involved in whatever was about to happen. Hello, I answered carefully, my voice guarded. There was a pause, and then I heard a voice that sounded similar to hers but older, more polished, with the kind of confidence that comes from always getting your way. Hi there, this is Margaret. I am her birth mother. She did not even say my daughter's name, just her, like I was supposed to automatically know who she meant. Like I had not been the one to name her, to sign her up for school, to know every detail of her life from the day she was born until the day she decided I was not real enough to matter. I waited silently, not giving her the courtesy of a warm greeting. Margaret continued, and I could hear her chewing something while she talked, casual and unbothered in a way that only someone who had never done the hard work of parenting could afford to be. I wanted to reach out about what happened at graduation dinner, she said. She is really upset about the whole credit card situation, and honestly I think there might be some misunderstanding between you two that we could clear up. I felt something snap inside me, not dramatically, but like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. Let me make something very clear, I said, speaking slowly and deliberately so she would not miss a single word. You do not get to call me and lecture me about misunderstandings after you helped her cut me out of her graduation celebration. You do not get to act like I am the problem when she is the one who told me I would not fit in with her real family." There was silence on the other end, not the awkward kind, but the kind that meant I had said something she was not prepared to hear. I continued, feeling 22 years of suppressed frustration pouring out of me all at once. "I raised her alone from the time she was 6 weeks old. Where were you when she had nightmares every night for 3 months after watching a scary movie? Where were you when she broke her arm falling off her bike and I spent the entire night in the emergency room holding her hand? Where were you for any of the hard parts, the boring parts, the parts that nobody thanks you for?" "You were nowhere," I said, my voice getting stronger with every word. "But now you want to show up and play family while I am supposed to keep paying for everything and staying invisible. You want to be her real mother while I get reduced to just some woman who helped out for a while." Margaret cleared her throat nervously. "I did not mean to upset you. I just thought maybe you would want to help her out. She is still your daughter too, is not she?" And that is when I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of the situation finally hit me fully. "She was my daughter until she decided I was not her real mother," I said. "She was my daughter until she told people I was just temporary childcare until her biological parents could take over." My voice cracked on the last part and I hated that it did. Hated that this stranger could still make me feel vulnerable and exposed. "She did not say those exact words," Margaret replied. But there was uncertainty in her voice now, like she was starting to realize she might have heard something similar herself. "She did," I said firmly. "And I heard her say them with my own ears. So do not call me and try to guilt me into being her safety net while you get to be her hero. Do not ask me to subsidize your fairy tale reunion." After I hung up, I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and just breathed. I felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep and everything to do with carrying the weight of rejection for so long. I thought about all the times over the years when I had made excuses for her behavior, even to myself. She is just going through a phase. She is confused about her identity. She does not really mean the hurtful things she says. But this was not confusion or a phase. This was a deliberate choice to replace me with people she barely knew just because they happened to share her genetic material. That evening I went through my closet and found the baby book I had kept for her from the day she came home from the hospital. It was thick with photos, hospital bracelets, first drawings, report cards, certificates from school programs, and little mementos from every stage of her growing up. I sat on my bed and flipped through pages that told the story of her entire childhood. Her first smile, her first word, her first step, all captured and preserved by someone who thought these moments mattered enough to remember forever. Every milestone was documented with love and pride by a woman who was apparently just temporary help until the real parents could show up. I thought about throwing it all away, about finally accepting that this chapter of my life was over and needed to be buried completely. But something in me could not do it. Not because I was clinging to false hope, but because those moments had been real even if she could not acknowledge that now. I had been there for every single day of her life that mattered. I had been the one to kiss scraped knees, to stay up all night when she was sick, to cheer at every school play and sporting event. That history could not be erased just because she had decided it was not valuable anymore. The next morning brought another knock at my door, and when I opened it, she was standing there again. But this time she did not look broken or desperate. She looked angry, her arms crossed defensively and her jaw set with determination. "Why did you tell my birth mother that I called you temporary childcare?" She snapped before I could even say hello. I told her that in confidence. I was trying to explain our relationship to people who did not understand the situation. I stared at her, amazed by her nerve. "You said it," I replied calmly. "You meant it. You have been acting like it for months. So do not stand there and act like I twisted your words around to hurt you." Her face flushed red with frustration. "You are making this more difficult than it needs to be. I came here to talk, not to fight with you." "Then maybe you should have come here with something other than complaints about me telling the truth," I shot back. "If you are embarrassed by what you said, maybe you should not have said it in the first place." She looked away, blinking rapidly. "It was just a poor choice of words. I was trying to help them understand that you raised me, but they are my biological parents. Came out wrong. No, I said, stepping closer. Came out exactly the way you meant it. You wanted them to know that I do not really count, that I was just filling in until the real parents could take their rightful place. Do not insult me by pretending it was a misunderstanding. Her lower lip started trembling. I do not want your money anymore. I just want things to go back to normal between us. What exactly is normal? Yes. You mean back to when you called me by my first name and excluded me from important events? Back to when you talked about your birth family like they were the answer to all your prayers while I was just some woman in the background. That normal? She stood there for a long moment, looking at me like I was a puzzle she could not solve. And I guess I was, because for the first time in her life, I was not bending to make her comfortable. I was not smoothing things over or pretending her words did not hurt. I was showing her exactly what it looked like when someone finally stops accepting unacceptable treatment. You cannot have it both ways, I continued. You cannot push me out of the parent role but expect me to keep providing parental support. You cannot call me temporary and then get upset when I start acting temporary. Either I matter to you or I do not. Pick one and live with your choice. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Maybe for the first time she was really understanding that her actions had consequences that she could not charm or guilt her way out of. The phone calls from Margaret started coming regularly after that. Always around dinner time. Always with the same tone of someone who thought she could manage the situation if she just found the right words to convince me to fall back in line. The third time she called, I did not even let her get through her opening pleasantries. Stop calling me, I said as soon as I heard her voice. I am not going to change my mind, and I am not going to pretend this is all some big misunderstanding that can be smoothed over with a conversation. But she is really struggling, Margaret insisted. She misses you and she realizes she made mistakes. Is not forgiveness what family is supposed to be about? I walked to my living room window and stared out at the street while I talked, watching neighbors walk their dogs and live their normal lives while mine was falling apart. She had months to miss me, I said. She had months to realize she was making mistakes. But she did not care about any of that until her fairy tale reunion did not work out the way she imagined it would. Now that you and your husband are not the perfect parent she built up in her head, suddenly she remembers I exist. That is not fair, Margaret protested. What is not fair, I replied, is asking someone to be a mother for 22 years and then acting like they were never really family at all. What is not fair is expecting me to keep providing support while being treated like hired help. What is not fair is you calling me and trying to guilt me into accepting treatment that you would never accept yourself. I hung up before she could respond, and this time I blocked her number. I was done being managed and manipulated by people who had contributed nothing to raising the child they now wanted to claim as their own. That evening I made a decision that felt both scary and liberating. I called the college where she was enrolled and removed myself as an authorized contact on her account. I also called her health insurance company and removed her from my policy. If she wanted independence from me, she could have complete independence. I was not doing it to be cruel. I was doing it to be clear. She could not pick and choose which parts of our relationship to keep based on what was convenient for her at any given moment. Either we were family or we were not. Either I mattered or I did not. There was no in-between option where I remained responsible for her well-being while being excluded from her life. 2 days later she showed up at my door again, but this time she looked different. Not angry or desperate, just tired. Defeated in a way that made her seem older than her 22 years. They want me to move out, she said without any greeting or small talk. My birth father says I need to learn to stand on my own feet instead of depending on other people to take care of me. I did not invite her in, but I did not close the door either. I just waited for her to continue. I called the insurance company to make a doctor's appointment and found out I am not covered anymore, she said, her voice getting smaller. I called the school about my transcript, and they said I was not an authorized student anymore because my emergency contact had been removed. She looked up at me with eyes that seemed to finally understand the full scope of what independence actually meant. I get it now, she whispered. I understand what you were trying to tell me. Do you? Asked, genuinely curious. Because understanding and changing are two different things. She nodded slowly. I know I hurt you. I know I made you feel like you did not matter. I was so excited about finding people who looked like me that I forgot about the person who actually raised me. I forgot that biology is not the same thing as family. Those were the words I had been waiting months to hear, but now that she was saying them, I realized they were not enough. Words were easy. Actions were hard. And her actions had shown me exactly how little I meant to her when she thought she had better options. I appreciate you saying that, I replied carefully. But I need you to understand that this is not something that can be fixed with an apology. You did not just hurt my feelings. You showed me who I really am to you when you think you do not need me anymore. She started crying again, but these tears looked different than before. Less desperate, more genuine. I want to fix this, she said. I want to find a way back to being your daughter again. I looked at her standing on my porch, finally seeing me clearly for the first time in months, and felt my heart break all over again. Not because I did not love her, but because I did. Because part of me wanted to open my arms and welcome her back and pretend none of this had ever happened. But I also knew that would be the worst thing I could do for both of us. She needed to learn that love is not just about what you can get from someone but what you are willing to give back. And I needed to learn that my worth as a person was not dependent on being needed by someone who only valued me when their other options disappeared. That is not how this works, I said gently but firmly. You do not get to be my daughter when it is convenient for you and someone else's daughter when that seems more appealing. You do not get to treat people like they are interchangeable and then expect them to be waiting when you change your mind.